You can tell who people think you are by the way they laugh before they know your story. The laughter started less than 10 seconds after Ethan Brooks walked through the doors of the luxury car auction. He heard it before he even reached the registration desk. Not loud enough to cause a scene, just loud enough to make their opinions clear. Men in tailored suits glanced at his faded work jacket. Women carrying designer handbags looked at his worn boots. A few whispered behind polite smiles. Others did not bother lowering their voices at all. Ethan pretended not to notice. Years of being a single father had taught him something important. Not every opinion deserved a response. The auction hall occupied nearly 30,000 square feet inside a restored historic building downtown. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Marble floors reflected the glow of expensive lighting. Rows of rare automobiles sat beneath spotlights like museum exhibits. Collectors, investors, and executives moved from vehicle to vehicle, discussing values that sounded unreal to most people. Some cars were expected to sell for more than the price of a house. Ethan walked slowly through the room carrying a small notebook. He did not look impressed. He looked focused. That difference mattered. At the registration desk, a young employee smiled politely. "Are you here to watch?" Ethan returned the smile. "I am here to bid." The employee hesitated. "Of course, sir." A man standing nearby chuckled. "This should be interesting." Several others laughed quietly. Ethan simply accepted his bidder number and continued walking. Across the hall, Victoria Sinclair watched the interaction from beside a silver European sports car. As chief executive officer of Sinclair Automotive Group, she attended most major auctions in the region. She was accustomed to recognizing serious buyers immediately. Wealth tended to advertise itself. Expensive watches, luxury clothing, confident conversations. Ethan possessed none of those signals. Yet something about him caught her attention. While everyone else seemed busy being seen, he appeared busy observing. He examined details, took notes, studied vehicle histories displayed beside each lot. Most surprisingly, he ignored the people around him completely. "Do you know him?" asked one executive standing nearby. Victoria glanced toward Ethan. "No. Probably wandered into the wrong event." Victoria said nothing. She continued watching. Ethan stopped beside a vintage luxury coupe scheduled to cross the auction block later that afternoon. Most attendees admired the paint, chrome, and interior. Ethan crouched slightly and examined something near the lower frame. Then he wrote a note. A few moments later, he moved to another vehicle and repeated the process. Curious. Very curious. Meanwhile, Ethan checked his phone. A text message waited from his 12-year-old daughter, Lily. "Good luck today, Dad. Remember what Grandpa always said." Ethan smiled immediately. Another message followed. "Trust what you know." The smile remained. Lily had heard stories about classic automobiles her entire life. She understood why this auction mattered. She also understood why her father rarely discussed his knowledge with strangers. Experience had taught him that people listened differently when they assumed you had money. Knowledge from a millionaire sounded impressive. Knowledge from a mechanic often sounded invisible. The auction officially began at 1 o'clock. Guests moved toward rows of seats facing a brightly illuminated stage. Conversations filled the room. Glasses clinked softly. Auction staff prepared documents. Energy built with every passing minute. Ethan took a seat near the middle section. Several attendees glanced at him and exchanged amused expressions. One man whispered something that triggered another round of laughter. Ethan remained calm. He opened his notebook, reviewed his notes, and waited. 5 minutes later, nobody in that room knew it yet, but the man they dismissed as an outsider had already noticed something that every expert, collector, and executive in the building had completely missed. The first vehicle crossed the auction block at exactly 1 o'clock. A polished collector coupe sold within minutes. Then another. Then another. The rhythm of the event settled into a familiar pattern. Bidders raised numbered paddles. The auctioneer spoke with rapid precision. Prices climbed. Applause followed successful sales. Throughout it all, Ethan Brooks remained almost completely still. He listened, watched, took notes, and waited. Several rows away, 2 collectors continued glancing in his direction. He has not bid once. Probably figured out he cannot afford anything. They laughed quietly. Ethan never reacted. He was focused on something far more important than proving himself to strangers. On stage, a series of luxury automobiles appeared one after another beneath bright spotlights. Some attracted enormous attention. Others sold quickly without much competition. Yet Ethan's notebook remained open to a single page. One specific lot number sat circled several times in dark ink. Across the room, Victoria Sinclair noticed it too. She had gradually become more curious with each passing hour. Most inexperienced attendees became distracted by the excitement of the auction. Ethan seemed immune to it. He studied details while others chased attention. At one point, she watched him compare photographs displayed in the auction catalog against notes he had written earlier. The behavior felt less like a collector and more like an investigator. During a short intermission, Victoria walked through the exhibition area, where several remaining vehicles sat waiting for their turn on stage. To her surprise, she found Ethan standing beside a dark green vintage luxury sedan. The car attracted very little attention compared to the exotic sports cars surrounding it. Most attendees walked past without stopping. Ethan was examining the vehicle identification plate near the engine compartment. "Interesting choice," Victoria said. Ethan looked up. "Good afternoon. Most people are looking at the million-dollar cars." Ethan smiled slightly. "Most people are not looking at this one." Victoria folded her arms. "Is there a reason they should?" For a moment, Ethan considered the question. Then he looked back at the vehicle. Sometimes the most important details are the easiest to overlook. Victoria glanced toward the sedan. "You think there is something special about it?" Ethan closed his notebook. "I think somebody made a mistake." Before she could ask another question, he politely excused himself and returned to the auction hall. Victoria remained beside the vehicle for several moments. She studied the same details he had examined. Yet nothing appeared unusual. Eventually, she shook her head and walked away. Still, the conversation lingered in her mind. Back inside the main hall, bidding resumed. The crowd seemed energized. Prices continued climbing. Excitement filled the room with every sale. Ethan remained patient. He had attended enough auctions throughout his life to understand a simple rule. The loudest moments rarely contain the greatest opportunities. 2 rows behind him, another bidder leaned forward. "You planning to buy anything today?" Ethan turned politely. "Maybe." The man grinned. "You picked an expensive hobby." Several nearby attendees laughed again. Ethan smiled and returned his attention to the stage. Their laughter no longer surprised him. He had heard similar reactions for years. At repair shops, at dealerships, at industry events. People often judged knowledge by appearance. They assumed expertise arrived wearing expensive watches and tailored suits. They rarely expected it to arrive in a work jacket. The afternoon moved steadily forward. More vehicles sold. More applause followed. Then finally the auctioneer announced the lot Ethan had been waiting for. The dark green sedan rolled slowly onto the stage beneath bright white lights. The room responded with polite interest rather than excitement. It was attractive, elegant, respectable. Yet compared to the rare sports cars and celebrity-owned vehicles that dominated the event, it seemed ordinary. The auction house representative summarized its history. Previous ownership records, restoration details, estimated market value. Everything sounded routine. Ethan listened carefully. So did Victoria. Something about his focus had made her pay attention. Then the representative mentioned one final detail. A minor note hidden near the end of the description. Most attendees barely noticed it. Ethan immediately wrote something in his notebook. His expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. Victoria saw it. And suddenly she realized he had been waiting for this exact moment all day. Around them, bidders prepared casually. Nobody expected anything remarkable to happen. The sedan appeared destined for an ordinary sale. Yet sitting quietly among the crowd, Ethan Brooks had just heard the confirmation he needed. The mistake was real. And for the first time since entering the building, he knew with certainty that the opportunity he discovered was even bigger than he originally believed. The bidding opened lower than most people expected. A few collectors raised their paddles without much enthusiasm. The numbers climbed slowly. $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. The atmosphere felt completely different from the excitement surrounding the earlier vehicles. No one viewed this sedan as the star of the auction. It was simply another respectable collector car moving through the schedule. Yet Ethan Brooks sat forward in his chair. His notebook remained open across his lap. Every detail he discovered throughout the day pointed toward the same conclusion. The experts were looking at the wrong story. Across the room, Victoria Sinclair noticed him again. Unlike the other bidders, he was not watching the auctioneer. He was watching the vehicle itself. More specifically, he kept glancing toward a photograph displayed on the large screen behind the stage. A photograph most people ignored. Curious. Very curious. $35,000, announced the auctioneer. Do I have 40? A paddle lifted near the front row. 40,000. The auctioneer smiled. Thank you. Another bid followed immediately. The room remained calm. Predictable. Comfortable. Then something happened that nobody expected. Ethan wrote one final note inside his notebook, closed it, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The movement seemed insignificant. Yet Victoria felt her curiosity intensify. It looked like the decision of a man who had finally finished solving a puzzle. Beside Ethan, two collectors continued exchanging amused comments. One leaned closer. You still thinking about bidding? Ethan smiled politely. Maybe. The man laughed. On this car? Ethan simply nodded. The laughter grew louder. Good luck with that. Ethan thanked him as if he had received sincere advice. That response confused them more than any argument could have. The bidding reached $45,000. Then stalled. Silence spread through the room. The auctioneer looked around. $45,000. Going once. A pause. Going twice. Another pause. Then a paddle rose calmly into the air. Ethan's paddle. The room reacted immediately. Several people turned around. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. One collector nearly dropped his auction catalog. The auctioneer pointed. Thank you, bidder 142. $50,000. The room became noticeably more alert. Ethan lowered his paddle and returned to complete silence. The two collectors beside him stared openly. You are serious? Ethan offered a small smile. Yes. Their expressions shifted from amusement to disbelief. Across the hall, Victoria's attention locked completely onto him. She watched carefully, not because of the bid itself. $50,000 was not unusual at this event. What mattered was Ethan's certainty. He showed no hesitation, no excitement, no nerves, only confidence. The bidding continued. Another collector entered. $55,000. Ethan responded immediately. $60,000. Another bid followed. $65,000. Ethan answered again. $70,000. Now the atmosphere changed entirely. People who ignored the vehicle moments earlier suddenly paid attention. Whispered conversations spread through the audience. Why was the mechanic bidding so aggressively? What did he think he knew? More importantly, what if he was right? The auctioneer appeared energized. $70,000. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then another bidder raised a paddle. $75,000. Ethan responded without hesitation. $80,000. Audible gasps echoed through the audience. The collectors beside him stared in shock. One shook his head. He has lost his mind. Several rose away. Someone laughed nervously. Others joined in. The laughter spread quickly, not because the bid was impossible, because they could not imagine a man like Ethan making it. They saw an old work jacket. They saw worn boots. They saw someone who looked out of place among wealth and influence. What they did not see was knowledge. What they did not see was experience. What they did not see was the secret hidden inside the vehicle sitting beneath the spotlight. Victoria remained silent. Unlike the others, she was no longer laughing. She remembered the way Ethan studied the identification plate, the photographs, the records, the tiny detail mentioned during the presentation. Suddenly a question entered her mind. What if he actually knows something? The bidding reached $85,000 before finally slowing. The room held its breath. The auctioneer scanned the audience. $85,000. Going once. Silence. Going twice. Silence again. Ethan never moved. Never blinked. Never looked away from the stage. Then the hammer struck. Sold. Applause followed, mixed with laughter and disbelief. Several attendees shook their heads. Others whispered openly. One man muttered that the mechanic had just destroyed his finances. Another suggested he would regret the purchase before sunrise. Ethan listened to none of it. He simply stood, buttoned his old jacket, and looked toward the sedan. Because while the rest of the room believed they had just witnessed a terrible mistake, Ethan Brooks knew something they did not. The real story of that vehicle had not been discovered yet, but very soon it would be. The laughter followed Ethan Brooks long after the auction ended. It echoed through conversations near the exits. It drifted across the valet area outside the building. It appeared in whispers, smiles, and confident predictions from people certain they had just witnessed an expensive mistake. Ethan heard almost none of it. His attention remained fixed on the paperwork resting inside a simple manila folder tucked beneath his arm. The sedan would be released the following morning after final verification procedures. Until then, all he could do was wait. Waiting, however, had never been his favorite activity. Outside, evenings settled over the city. Luxury vehicles rolled away from the auction house beneath glowing streetlights. Drivers discussed purchases. Collectors compared investments. Industry executives exchanged business cards and future plans. Ethan walked toward an aging pickup truck parked several blocks away. Compared to the vehicles surrounding it, the truck looked completely out of place. Yet it started immediately when he turned the key. The engine's familiar rumble brought a small smile to his face. Moments later, his phone rang. The caller identification showed Lily. Ethan answered immediately. "Hey kiddo, did you buy it?" Ethan laughed. News travels fast. "Dad, yes. Did you buy it?" Her excitement was impossible to miss. Ethan glanced through the windshield at the city lights ahead. "Yes." A brief silence followed. Then came an enthusiastic cheer. "I knew it." Ethan smiled. "You do not even know why I bought it." "I do not need to." Lily answered confidently. "If you spent that much money, there is a reason." Ethan laughed again. The simple faith in her voice warmed him more than any auction victory could. Back at home later that evening, Lily sat at the kitchen table while Ethan reviewed documents spread across the surface. The modest house carried signs of years spent prioritizing necessities over luxuries. Family photographs decorated the walls. School projects covered part of the refrigerator. Everything felt familiar, comfortable, real. Lily studied her father carefully. "You are looking at the same page again." Ethan glanced down. She was right. "Maybe. That means you are thinking." "Probably." Lily smiled. "About the car?" Ethan nodded slowly. "About what comes next." The answer mattered. Purchasing the sedan was only the beginning. Proving his theory would require evidence. Solid evidence. The kind that transformed suspicion into fact. Across town, Victoria Sinclair sat inside her penthouse office reviewing reports from the auction. Yet despite several successful acquisitions made by her company that day, one detail continued distracting her. Ethan Brooks. More specifically, the confidence he displayed while everyone else laughed. She replayed the moment repeatedly in her mind. The bid. The certainty. The complete absence of hesitation. Wealthy people often acted confident. That was normal. Ethan's confidence felt different. Quieter. Less concerned with appearances. More connected to knowledge. Eventually, Victoria opened the auction catalog and located the sedan's listing. She examined every photograph carefully. Then the documentation. Then the ownership history. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet she could not shake the feeling that she was missing something. Somewhere inside those records existed a detail important enough to make a mechanic risk $85,000, while an entire room questioned his judgment. The next morning arrived cold and clear. Ethan reached the auction facility shortly after sunrise. The city remained quiet. Long shadows stretched across the pavement. Inside the vehicle release area, staff prepared final paperwork while purchased automobiles waited beneath bright warehouse lighting. Ethan walked directly toward the dark green sedan. Seeing it again confirmed what he already suspected. The answer was there, hidden in plain sight. He moved slowly around the vehicle, examining details he had noticed the previous day. Then he stopped beside a section near the rear compartment. A tiny detail, easy to overlook, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Ethan smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not an excited smile. The smile of a man whose questions had finally received answers. At that exact moment, another vehicle entered the warehouse parking area outside. Victoria Sinclair stepped out carrying her own copy of the auction catalog. Curiosity had brought her there. She told herself the visit was merely professional interest. Yet deep down she suspected something else. She wanted to know why the only man everyone mocked seemed completely certain that he had just changed his future. And within the next few minutes, she was about to discover that the real story of the sedan had never appeared in any auction description, expert report, or valuation estimate. It was hidden somewhere much deeper, exactly where Ethan knew it would be. Victoria Sinclair found Ethan Brooks standing beside the sedan exactly where she expected. The warehouse lights reflected softly across the dark green paint. Employees moved through the facility completing paperwork and preparing vehicle releases. Yet Ethan seemed unaware of everything around him. His attention remained fixed on a small section near the rear compartment. Victoria approached quietly. "You came back early." Ethan glanced up and smiled politely. "So did you." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Victoria finally looked toward the vehicle. "I could not stop thinking about it." Ethan nodded. "Neither could I." She folded her arms. "What did you find?" Ethan hesitated. Not because he wanted to hide anything. Because he wanted to be certain before saying it out loud. Years of experience had taught him an important lesson. Facts deserve patience. Assumptions did not. He carefully opened a storage compartment and retrieved several documents that had been included with the vehicle. Most bidders ignored them. Most auction houses barely mentioned them. To Ethan, they were everything. Victoria watched him spread the papers across a nearby workbench. Service records, restoration notes, ownership documentation, inspection reports. Nothing appeared unusual, at least not initially. Then Ethan pointed to a name buried inside one of the older records. Victoria leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed. She read it again, then a third time. Suddenly she understood why Ethan had spent hours studying the sedan. That cannot be right. Ethan smiled. "I thought the same thing." The name belonged to a legendary automotive engineer whose work had influenced some of the most valuable collector vehicles ever produced. His personal projects were extraordinarily rare. Collectors spent years searching for them. Museums competed to acquire them. Private buyers paid astonishing amounts whenever one appeared. Victoria looked back at the sedan. "You think this vehicle was connected to him?" Ethan nodded. "Not connected." He pointed toward another document. "Owned." Silence filled the warehouse. Even surrounded by activity, the moment felt strangely still. Victoria examined the records again. The connection had never appeared in the auction description. It never appeared in the valuation report. Somehow, through decades of ownership changes and incomplete documentation, the significance had been overlooked. Not intentionally, simply forgotten. Ethan continued. The service records matched the timeline. Another document slid across the workbench. The modifications match his known projects. Then another. And this serial reference confirms the connection. Victoria stared at the evidence. Every piece fit together. The realization felt almost unreal. The sedan was not simply a collector car. It was potentially one of the most significant discoveries to appear at auction in years. "Does anyone else know?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." At that moment, a warehouse employee approached carrying final release paperwork. Ethan signed the documents calmly. The employee thanked him and walked away. Victoria could not help smiling. "You just bought a vehicle worth far more than $85,000. Ethan closed the folder. "Maybe." She laughed softly. "You are still being cautious." Ethan shrugged. "The facts matter more than excitement." That answer explained everything. It explained why he never reacted to the laughter, why he ignored the criticism, why he remained calm when everyone else rushed to judgment. He trusted evidence more than opinions. Several hours later, the sedan arrived at Ethan's small workshop outside town. Lily ran outside the moment she heard the trailer pull into the driveway. "Is this it?" Ethan nodded. "This is it." She walked slowly around the vehicle. "It looks normal." Ethan smiled. "That is why nobody noticed." Lily laughed. "So what happens now?" Ethan looked at the sedan sitting beneath the afternoon sunlight. The answer was simple. Verification. Authentication. Patience. The same approach that guided every important decision in his life. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Just careful work. Meanwhile, news from the auction continued spreading among collectors. Most still believed Ethan had overpaid. Some openly mocked the purchase. Others used it as an example of why inexperienced bidders should avoid high-end auctions. The criticism reached social media, industry forums, collector groups. Everywhere the same conclusion appeared. The mechanic had made a mistake. Yet sitting quietly inside his garage that evening, Ethan reviewed documents while Lily completed homework nearby. Neither seemed concerned. The truth did not need defending. It only needed time. Outside, golden sunlight faded beyond the workshop windows. The sedan rested beneath soft overhead lights. Calm, silent, unassuming. Exactly like the man who bought it. And somewhere hidden inside its history was a story valuable enough to change everything. The laughter still existed. The doubt still existed. But for the first time, Victoria Sinclair found herself wondering how long it would survive once the rest of the world discovered what Ethan Brooks already knew. 3 days passed before the first piece of confirmation arrived. Ethan Brooks was alone in his workshop when the email appeared. Outside, rain tapped softly against the metal roof. Inside, the scent of machine oil and old leather filled the air. Lily sat nearby, finishing a school project while quiet music played through a small speaker. It was an ordinary evening, the kind of evening Ethan valued most. Then his computer alerted him to a new message. He opened it immediately. The sender was one of the most respected automotive historians in the country. Ethan had submitted copies of the documentation the morning after the auction. He trusted facts more than assumptions. Independent verification mattered. His eyes moved carefully across the screen. The historian confirmed that several documents appeared authentic. More importantly, the ownership records aligned with known archives connected to the legendary engineer. Ethan leaned back slowly. Lily noticed the expression on his face. Good news. Ethan nodded. Very good news. She smiled. How good? Ethan turned the monitor toward her. The first part of the story is real. Lily read the message. Her eyes widened. So you were right. Ethan laughed softly. It is starting to look that way. Yet despite the encouraging news, he remained cautious. One confirmation was not enough. The discovery required complete authentication. Every detail needed examination. Every record needed verification. Patience remained his greatest advantage. Across town, Victoria Sinclair received a phone call from a collector she knew well. Have you heard about the mechanic? Victoria smiled. Which story? Apparently, he is trying to prove that sedan belonged to someone important. Victoria listened quietly. The collector laughed. People will do anything to justify a bad purchase. Victoria thanked him for the information and ended the call. Yet unlike most people discussing Ethan, she was no longer dismissing the possibility. She had seen the evidence. She had seen his confidence. Most importantly, she had seen how carefully he approached every conclusion. That kind of certainty rarely came from wishful thinking. Back at the workshop, Ethan continued gathering information. More documents surfaced. Archived photographs, service invoices, historical references, small pieces of a much larger puzzle. Each discovery strengthened the story. Each discovery pushed the sedan further away from ordinary collector status. One afternoon, a package arrived from a private archive hundreds of miles away. Inside were copies of maintenance records previously believed lost. Ethan carefully reviewed every page. Then he found it. A signature. Not just any signature. The signature. The same name hidden within the ownership records. The same name connected to the engineer whose projects had become legends among collectors. Ethan stared at the document for several seconds. Then he called Lily into the office. She examined the page. This is important, right? Ethan nodded. Very important. How important? Ethan smiled. Remember when everyone laughed? Lily laughed too. Yes. Ethan placed the document carefully on the desk. They would not be laughing if they saw this. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout the collector community. Online discussions grew larger every day. Some people remained skeptical. Others began reconsidering their opinions. A few experts started asking questions of their own. The sedan that attracted almost no attention during the auction was suddenly becoming a topic of national interest. Yet Ethan avoided interviews. He ignored social media. He declined requests for comments. Every morning, he opened the workshop. Every afternoon, he worked on customer vehicles. Every evening, he spent time with Lily. His life remained remarkably unchanged. That quiet consistency fascinated Victoria more than the discovery itself. One evening, she visited the garage after work. The sun hung low across the horizon. Golden light filled the parking lot. Ethan was finishing a repair while Lily organized paperwork inside the office. Victoria walked slowly around the sedan. The rumors are getting bigger. Ethan smiled. Rumors usually do. People are starting to believe you. Ethan wiped his hands with a shop towel. People can believe whatever they want. Victoria looked at him carefully. You really do not care what they think. Ethan considered the question. Then he glanced through the office window where Lily sat working. For a long time, I thought respect came from convincing people. Eventually, I learned something different. Victoria waited. Ethan smiled softly. The truth does not need an audience. The words lingered between them. Quiet. Simple. Powerful. And as the evening sunlight reflected across the sedan's polished surface, another email notification appeared on Ethan's phone. This one came from a major authentication authority. The final review was complete. The answer everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. The email remained unopened for almost 30 seconds. Not because Ethan Brooks was afraid of the answer. Quite the opposite. Years of experience had taught him that life-changing moments deserved respect. He stood quietly inside the workshop office while evening sunlight filtered through the windows. Lily watched from across the room. Victoria Sinclair stood nearby beside the sedan. 3 people. 1 message. 1 answer. Finally, Ethan opened the email. Silence filled the room. His eyes moved slowly across the screen. Then he read it again. A 3rd time. Lily immediately noticed the expression on his face. Dad. Ethan looked up. For a moment he said nothing. Then a smile appeared. Not a loud smile. Not a triumphant smile. The quiet smile of a man whose patience had been rewarded. It is authentic. Lily jumped from her chair. Really? Ethan nodded. Victoria stepped closer. Ethan handed her the phone. She read the statement carefully. The authentication authority had completed its review. Every major detail had been verified. Ownership records, historical documentation, engineering modifications, archival references. The conclusion was undeniable. The sedan was officially recognized as one of the engineer's documented personal development vehicles. Victoria lowered the phone slowly. This changes everything. Ethan glanced toward the vehicle resting beneath the workshop lights. Yes, it did. News spread faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, industry publications published articles about the discovery. Automotive historians discussed the vehicle. Collector forums exploded with speculation. Analysts revised value estimates upward, then upward again, and then even higher. The same people who mocked Ethan at the auction suddenly wanted interviews. Phone calls arrived daily. Emails filled his inbox. Reporters requested statements. Collectors asked about private offers. Auction houses expressed interest in future representation. Yet Ethan continued opening the garage every morning at the same time. He continued repairing customer vehicles. He continued eating dinner with Lily. Fame interested him far less than peace. Across the collector world, however, the mood had changed dramatically. The laughter disappeared first, then the jokes, then the criticism. In their place came something far less common. Respect. One of the collectors who had laughed beside Ethan during the auction eventually called the workshop. Ethan answered personally. Walker Garage. A familiar voice spoke. I owe you an apology. Ethan immediately recognized him. The collector hesitated. I judged you before I knew anything about you. Ethan leaned back in his chair. It happens. Still. The man paused. I was wrong. Ethan smiled. Thank you. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. Yet after hanging up, Ethan found himself thinking about it. Not because of the apology, because of what it represented. People were finally seeing what had always been there. Not just the value of the vehicle, the value of looking deeper before making assumptions. Several weeks later, a major collector organization invited Ethan to present the discovery at their annual conference. Hundreds of industry leaders attended. Historians, investors, executives, enthusiasts. Victoria encouraged him to accept. Lily practically insisted. Eventually, Ethan agreed. The conference hall looked remarkably similar to the auction venue where everything began. Elegant lighting, expensive suits, influential people. Yet this time the atmosphere felt different. Nobody laughed when he entered. Nobody whispered. Nobody questioned whether he belonged. When Ethan walked onto the stage, the audience applauded. Not because he became wealthy. Not because he purchased a valuable vehicle. Because he saw something others missed. He approached the podium calmly. The room grew quiet. Ethan spoke about research, patience, documentation, attention to detail. He never mentioned the criticism, never mentioned the laughter, never mentioned the people who doubted him. Instead, he focused entirely on the process, on the importance of curiosity, on the value of knowledge. Victoria sat near the front row listening carefully. Around her, industry leaders took notes. The same community that dismissed Ethan now treated every word with respect. Then near the end of his presentation, Ethan shared something unexpected. Most people think this story is about a car. The audience listened. It is not. The room became completely silent. Ethan smiled gently. It is about assumptions. He paused. People saw a work jacket and decided they knew the whole story. No bitterness entered his voice. No anger. Only truth. The car taught the same lesson. People looked at the surface and missed what mattered. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than applause, because everyone in that room understood exactly what he meant, including those who once laughed the loudest. And somewhere in the audience, Victoria realized that Ethan Brooks had accomplished something far more valuable than discovering a rare vehicle. He had changed the way an entire room thought about worth, respect, and the quiet power of being underestimated. The conference presentation changed everything. Within days, the authenticated discovery dominated collector headlines across the country. Automotive magazines featured the story on their front pages. Industry podcasts discussed it for hours. Historians praised the research. Experts analyzed the documentation. What began as a quiet purchase by a single father in a worn work jacket had become one of the most talked about discoveries in recent collector car history. Yet the most surprising change was not the attention. It was the silence. The laughter that once followed Ethan Brooks had disappeared completely. In its place came respect. Invitations arrived from prestigious events. Private collectors requested meetings. Museums expressed interest in displaying the sedan. One institution even offered a temporary exhibition dedicated to the engineer's legacy and the remarkable vehicle connected to it. Ethan appreciated the recognition, but he never seemed transformed by it. One Saturday morning, several weeks after the conference, he stood inside his workshop helping a customer repair a family pickup truck. Grease stained his hands. Tools covered the workbench. The scene looked exactly like it had months earlier. A visitor entering the garage would never guess they were standing beside a man whose discovery had become national news. Lily noticed it too. During lunch, she sat with her father outside the workshop beneath a clear blue sky. "Does it feel strange?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "What part?" "Everyone knows who you are now." Ethan looked across the parking lot. Customers came and went. Employees worked steadily. Life continued moving forward. "Not really." Lily laughed. "Most people would be excited." Ethan considered that. "I am excited." "You do not act excited." "That is different." Lily shook her head and smiled. Some things about her father would probably never change. Later that afternoon, a black luxury sedan pulled into the parking lot. Victoria Sinclair stepped out carrying a folder. Ethan immediately recognized her. Over the past several weeks, their friendship had grown naturally. Not because of the discovery, because of mutual respect. Victoria walked toward the office. "I have news." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Good news." "Very good news." They sat together while Victoria opened the folder. Inside was an official offer from a major collector consortium. The organization wanted to purchase the sedan for an amount that exceeded every estimate released so far. Ethan reviewed the figures carefully. Even Victoria seemed impressed. The offer represented financial security beyond anything Ethan had ever imagined. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. Most people would accept immediately. Ethan looked through the office window. The sedan sat quietly beneath the afternoon sunlight. The same vehicle everyone ignored. The same vehicle everyone mocked him for buying. Yet somehow it felt like more than an investment now. It represented patience, faith, belief. Every lesson he hoped Lily would carry through life. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked. Ethan smiled softly. "I am thinking about timing." Victoria laughed. "That sounds exactly like you." Over the next several days, Ethan carefully considered the decision. Not because he doubted the offer, because he wanted to make the right choice. One evening he sat on the front porch with Lily as the sun disappeared behind the horizon. Warm summer air drifted through the neighborhood. The sounds of children playing echoed in the distance. "If you sell it, what happens?" Lily asked. "Someone else becomes responsible for its story. And if you keep it?" Ethan smiled. "Then I am responsible." Lily thought about that answer. Then she nodded. "I think I understand." Ethan looked at her. "What do you understand?" She smiled. It was never really about the money. Ethan laughed quietly. Sometimes she understood everything without needing an explanation. A week later, the collector consortium increased its offer again. This time the number reached levels that shocked even seasoned industry experts. News spread rapidly. Headlines appeared everywhere. Analysts discussed the sale as if it were already complete. Yet Ethan still had not given his answer. The collector world waited. Victoria waited. Even Lily waited. But deep inside, Ethan already knew something the rest of them did not. The greatest reward from this journey had never been measured in dollars. It was measured in something much quieter, something far more valuable. And before making his final decision, he intended to honor that truth completely. The answer came on a quiet Tuesday morning. No cameras, no reporters, no crowded conference halls. Just Ethan Brooks sitting at the same wooden desk inside the workshop office where he had spent countless hours reviewing documents, paying bills, and planning for the future. Outside, sunlight poured through the open garage doors. Employees worked on customer vehicles. Air compressors hummed softly, enough to secure Lily's education, enough to expand the business, enough to change everything. Yet as Ethan looked at the document, his thoughts drifted back to that first day. The laughter, the whispers, the assumptions, then something else. Lily's text message. Trust what you know. A smile appeared. Later that afternoon, Victoria Sinclair arrived at the garage. She already knew a decision had been made. The only question was what it would be. Ethan handed her a copy of the signed agreement. Victoria reviewed it carefully. Then she looked up in surprise. You sold it. Ethan nodded. Yes. He did not purchase exotic cars. He did not disappear into luxury. Instead, he expanded the garage. He created apprenticeship programs for young mechanics. He invested in better equipment. He established a scholarship fund supporting students interested in automotive engineering. And most importantly, he secured Lily's future. One evening several months later, a community celebration took place outside the newly expanded workshop. Families gathered beneath string lights. Employees shared meals with customers. Children laughed while music drifted through the warm evening air. The atmosphere felt less like a business event and more like a neighborhood gathering. Ethan stood near the edge of the crowd, watching quietly. Victoria joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. You built something special here. Ethan looked around. Employees who once struggled to find steady work now had stable careers. Young apprentices learned valuable skills. Families depended on opportunities created inside the garage. The workshop had become more than a business. It had become a community. We built it, Ethan replied. Victoria smiled. Still humble. Ethan laughed softly. Still honest. Nearby, Lily spoke with several scholarship recipients. Her confidence had grown over the past year. Her future felt brighter than ever. Watching her smile meant more to Ethan than any auction result, more than any headline, more than any check. As the evening continued, several guests approached to congratulate him. Some had attended the auction. Some had laughed. Every one of them offered respect. Ethan accepted it graciously. Not because he needed validation, because grace always mattered more than pride. Later, as the celebration came to an end, Ethan and Lily stood together outside the garage. The parking lot had grown quiet. Stars filled the sky overhead. Warm light spilled from the workshop windows behind them. Lily slipped her hand into her father's. Do you ever think about that day at the auction? She asked. Ethan smiled. Sometimes. What do you think about? Ethan looked across the property, then toward the garage, then toward the future they had built together. I think about how easy it is to judge what we do not understand. Lily nodded. And Ethan's smile deepened. I think about how important it is not to let other people decide your worth. For a moment neither spoke. They simply stood together beneath the night sky. Peaceful, grateful, whole. The laughter was gone. The doubt was gone. What remained was something stronger. Respect earned through patience. Success earned through character. And the quiet dignity of a man who never needed to prove anyone wrong because he spent his life proving himself right. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below about a time when someone underestimated you. And if you believe kindness, perseverance, and second chances still matter, we would be honored to have you join us for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary value hidden inside ordinary people.